I want to ask you a question, Zach,
Yeah.
because we kind of got off on a little tangent, but you brought up something about the education of the people voting. I had a talk with one of my friends like a month ago, and I brought up this idea. And in case I ever run for president in the presidency in the future, this is not something I believe in. This is simply just food for thought.
Okay.
So don't hold this against me, future media people. Anyway, the idea is, what if you had an exam for the president for voting?
Yeah.
Like you have to pass an exam to be allowed to vote.
Very funny you should say that. I thought the
Oh,
exact same thing that you just said many times. And I'm not afraid to like admit that. I think it just shows a
The argument is
yeah,
you're depriving the right from stupid people.
correct.
That's the argument.
Correct.
and
And
then
well,
everyone quote
well,
unquote has that right, right? But
well,
it's
it's a
not
little
fair.
right, but the argument against stupid people is a little bit that's a little simplistic. The argument is really you're making a test. I mean, to make that test truly fair, that's a really difficult thing to do because it's always going to have biases and to certain groups. Like for example, look at like the SAT or the standardized testing. I mean, it's only until recently that people have really begun to unpack how that affects for example, poor communities and immigrant communities don't have the same access to a lot of the educational opportunities.
Exactly.
So, I mean, there's so many, like, you can unpack how it's not just stupid people. It would
No,
be,
no, no, no. That was
right,
obviously me oversimplifying it, but like basically the idea is if you're poor and can't afford a tutor
right,
or a textbook, or the school system is just not very good in your
right,
location, well then how are you going to pass but that other guy who has access to
right.
everything can pass? So yeah, I understand that. But in this situation, I feel, and this is one of the three things that I think this country has just kept getting worse and worse and worse, in my opinion, is that the education system is just getting worse and worse and
Agree
worse.
a
Thank
hundred
you.
percent,
I
Thank you. I
don't
wanted to get here.
100%.
I'm so mad at like the way the educate. I'm serious, because like I keep thinking to myself, if I was the president, how would I save the country? How would I make people's lives better? And I genuinely think one of those things is education.
100%.
Education, because here's the thing, right? And this bothers me a lot because I just don't. There's something missing in this equation, unless you're being cynical, which I could be. But I is like in democratic cities, in the big metropolitan areas, why is the education so bad
Tax base.
if they're getting so much tax money?
It's not tax money. They don't have enough tax money. That's the problem. That's why in
That
suburban
doesn't sound
communities
right. You're saying the
with rich
the
white people,
cities.
there's plenty of tax base to fund great schools. It's all about
No, no,
tax
no.
base.
How high is the tax rate in the cities? It's usually higher. No,
Sure,
am I wrong?
but if people aren't paying the same, like for example in North Philadelphia, where I'm from Philadelphia, and if you look at a neighborhood in North Philadelphia, the taxes are low because people have a low income and can't obviously afford to pay the high taxes in another neighborhood in the city. It's if you were to make taxes for and so if you actually look at the neighborhood right outside of Philadelphia called Lower Marion, it's a
R.I.P. Kobe.
yeah, it's actually where Kobe grew up, right? But yeah, so Lower Marion has phenomenal public schools. Like my parents were considering moving me. I live like in the center of Philadelphia. Or I lived in the center of Philadelphia, and my parents were actually moving me, or thinking moving the whole family, which is ironically just me, but moving the whole family to Lower Marion to get the better schools. But the issue with that was, we wanted to be in the city, blah blah blah, But the problem is the city schools were horrendous, and I guess that's the point that you're making. But that's just a whole different. I mean, that's so complex, and that does have to do with just purely the cities not having the tax base to support the amount of population that they have, and that's
That's
just a problem with
incredible to
poverty.
me because I mean, how can you have such a populous location, a literal epicenter of people, and there are so many big cities in the U.S. I mean, you have look, L.A., San Francisco, Austin. I mean, that's like west and like southwest. On the East Coast, we have Boston, New York, D.C., Philly. I mean, dude, there are so many huge cities with so much concentration of people. in just a small radius. Like, I mean, New York City, for instance, like you go within a 5-mile radius, there's like 10 million people type of thing. It's crazy.
Well, I mean, just another thing to add on to that, though, is like not every single school in the cities are bad. I don't know how it works in other cities, but I know how it works in Philadelphia. You know, they have the charter school system and, you know, like magnet schools. So, you know, they recruit the best kids from local schools to go to these bigger magnet schools. And, you know, those schools are actually really good. You know, so it's definitely a variance of different types of schools. But I feel like another thing that I have a conservative friend, he likes to bring this up too. We should also be teaching people technical skills as well. You know, not everyone has
100%.
Yeah, not everyone has to go into, you know, academia. And I agree with that 100%. But, you know, that's, again, taking a huge, you know, step back and reinvestment into, and more than reinvestment, reanalysis of what school even is and how we should be educating people.
That's my
actually
big thing, honestly.
I think I misinterpreted, so I'm going to take back my agreement with you. When you say technical skills, you mean like stuff like mechanic or that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean mechanic.
Well, technical skills can be anything from working with your hands to working on a computer.
Right. I mean,
oh, well,
sure.
Yeah, but like, here's the thing. I feel these 4 things should be like a must. Like, even if you're not, like, I understand the concept of the fish trying to fly principle. It's the notion that if you told a fish to fly, it could put all its effort into trying to fly, but it just can't do it because it wasn't made for that. I understand that principle, but we're not fish, you know? So I feel there should be 4 key things that everyone in America should be good at. You know, not genius. I'm not asking for genius. I'm not asking for prodigy level, but like they should be competent in this. And that is math, science, English 100%. It is inexcusable to have a country where the people cannot speak this language, and history. And the reason these are the main 4 is because math and science, they teach you how to think analytically and understand facts, look at empirical data and interpret it. It gives you the ability to receive information and come to a conclusion. English is the ability to communicate. It's the ability to have a thought and then convey it to someone else in a way that they can understand. How many times have you dealt with a person who says something along the lines of, I just feel like this. It's like, but they can't really say what they're feeling. They're just like, Trump just makes me so mad. And it's like, okay, yeah, sweet dude. It's like, you understand, it's like they can't communicate because of people in poor neighborhoods especially that don't speak English as well as they should, in my opinion. And history, sorry about that. History is extremely important because if you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. You know, there are so many, like the fact that we live in America, where there are self-proclaimed Marxists that are getting like followings, is like, this is inexcusable. These people have no idea what Marxism is. At least not the real stuff. They read the book. They're like, oh, that's a nice idea, and then they became Marxist.
Right. Well, I mean, I would say, I mean, again, I am, just to be totally clear, I am by no means a Marxist. I'm not even close. But I am interested to know like why that is. And I don't think it's as simplistic as what you say. It's not just about feeling. I do feel like it's an idea of, I don't know if you've heard of the idea of relative deprivation, but the idea that, you know, we live in a very connected society and, you know, the world is connected, and for the longest time, America has been this exceptional place for, you know, white people and generally people
for
of
everyone.
higher income.
There isn't another country in this world where someone of any race can go from dirt poor nothing to the highest level. There isn't one country like that.
Well, you're right. So let me finish. I was getting there. So
sorry.
No. You're fine. But I just wanted to say, so you know, obviously, you know, we've lived in 70 years of that. But before 50 to 60 years, not 70. But, you know, before the 1960s, you know, it wasn't equal for everyone. But putting that aside for 1 second, I do think it's important, this idea of relative deprivation, of like why people, for example, are into like, Marxism. And again, the same can go on the right for very different reasons of, xenophobia and stuff like that. But again, just to take the Marxist example, relative deprivation. So people in this country have long had the idea that their lives are exceptional. They live in the United States. We're in this incredible country that's, exceptional from the rest of the world.
The majority of people, unfortunately, not
the
everyone.
majority people, of course. And again, that didn't really apply to like a lot of the country before the 1960s, and even now to a certain extent. But anyway, that's a different conversation. But again, I know there's a lot of caveats to this, so it's interesting to make this point. But now you look at the world and you say, oh wow, like we are the United States. We don't have a particularly high standard of living. We're not number one in the world for, go down the list of education, standard of living, XYZ, go down the list. And now interestingly to that equation, we add something like the internet that makes the ability to look at other societies and to compare our society with other societies very easily. So now we're looking, so now you see that a lot of people, and I think traditionally on the left with this issue specifically, are looking at other countries in Western Europe, for example, and Northern Europe, and are saying
relative deprivation. It makes sense.
And are saying, wow, like they have healthcare. They don't have to pay anything for their healthcare.
This is very ignorant. This mentality, because they are not.
But it may be ignorant in the sense that, to dig down into the depths of, the policy itself. And I'm not saying that that's not true, but I am saying that it's not necessarily just out of an emotion. It's this feeling of deprivation from where we could be with a certain policy. And they view that Marxism is the correct way to get there. Obviously, I disagree, but I think it's important.